My name is Dana Carson. I'm 30 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life thinking I understood what it meant to belong somewhere. I work as a freelance graphic designer, and for years my workspace was the sun-drenched corner of my dad's house in Ridgewood, New Jersey. That house wasn't just a place. It was the rhythm of my childhood, and the last physical piece of my father I had left. Wooden floors that creaked in familiar patterns, the gentle smell of old books and coffee, the wind chimes that sang outside the kitchen window. Every detail felt like part of me. It was a home built from shared memories. And then, it was taken. My father passed away suddenly in March. A heart attack. One of those moments where life splits in two, before and after. He had been my rock since I was 12, after my mother died in a car accident. When he remarried 5 years ago, I didn't fully welcome it, but I respected his happiness. Cheryl, his new wife, was the kind of woman who smiled through her teeth, polished, polite, but always a little distant with me. Still, I never thought she'd become the storm after the grief. I thought she'd at least honor him. After the funeral, I gave myself space. I didn't rush to the house. We both needed time. I thought Cheryl would grieve, organize things slowly, maybe call me when she was ready. But 6 weeks later, when I returned, everything had changed. The house stood there, unchanged on the outside, but hollow inside. The furniture was gone. My dad's records, his books, even the curtains my mom once sewed were missing. It was as if someone had vacuumed out the soul of the home. When I tried my key, it didn't work. Cheryl opened the door like she'd been expecting trouble. She stood in the doorway, one hand on her hip, looking me over like I was a solicitor. "You shouldn't be here, Dana," she said flatly. No hello, no grief in her eyes, just irritation. I asked what happened to the house. She told me with a tight smile that it was hers now. Her voice was confident, rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. I blinked at her. "There's no will," I said. "We haven't even—" She cut me off. "Exactly. No will means I inherit. As his wife, it's mine. Legally." I tried to step inside, but she moved to block me. I could see past her shoulder. Where Dad's chair used to be was now an empty square of carpet. The warmth was gone. The memories had been replaced by cold, bare walls. She didn't even flinch when I asked about my things. "There was nothing left," she said. "Everything that mattered was his, and now it's mine." I walked away before I broke down. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. Sitting in my car, I stared at the wheel, feeling that old ache of being alone again. My childhood had been quiet, but never lonely. Not with Dad. Now, the silence felt heavier. I drove aimlessly for hours that day, ending up in the parking lot of a closed diner, headlights off, just thinking about how someone could take so much and still feel entitled to more. Weeks passed. I tried to move forward, but that sense of loss kept gnawing at me. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Mr. Halpern, my father's longtime lawyer. His voice was low and deliberate. "Dana," he said, "your father left behind a sealed will. He wrote it before Cheryl came into the picture. It's just come to light." I didn't say anything at first. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear him. A sealed will? Why hadn't I heard of this before? What did it mean? I drove to Mr. Halpern's office the next morning. My hands trembled as I parked outside the familiar brick building, the same one my dad and I used to visit when I was in college, and he helped me draft my first contract. Everything felt different now. He wasn't there to explain. The receptionist smiled politely and led me inside. Mr. Halpern was waiting with a thick envelope on his desk. "Your father wanted you to have this. It was meant to be opened only if something happened to him." That night, I sat in my apartment staring out the window. The streetlights outside flickered in the rain, casting long shadows on the floor. I hadn't opened the envelope yet. My fingers hovered over the seal. I thought about the house, about Cheryl's smug face, about all the things she claimed were hers. If what was in that envelope said what I thought it might say, everything she took would no longer be hers to keep. Maybe Dad knew all along that she couldn't be trusted. I finally opened the envelope the next morning. My hands shook as I slid my thumb under the seal, carefully unfolding the pages inside. My father's handwriting was neat, deliberate. The will was dated 2 years before he married Cheryl. It wasn't just a draft. It was notarized, signed, and sealed by Mr. Halpern himself. As I read through it, the tears started forming. He had named me as the sole heir to everything. The house, his savings, his possessions. Every detail was clear. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. He had even left a letter for me, handwritten and folded behind the official pages. "Dana," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you know how much I loved you." I sat down on my bed and let the words wash over me. He talked about the memories we shared, about how proud he was of the woman I'd become. He mentioned Cheryl, too, briefly. "If she's still around," he wrote, "be careful. She sees value only in what she can possess." The words hit me hard. He'd seen it. And still, he married her. The next day, I returned to Mr. Halpern's office to discuss next steps. He explained that because the will was properly signed and sealed, it superseded any assumption of inheritance Cheryl might be making. But it wouldn't be simple. Cheryl's already taken over the property. She'll likely contest it. I nodded, already anticipating the confrontation. It wouldn't just be legal. It would be personal. She thought she had won. But my father had left a map, and I was ready to follow it. I hired a probate attorney named Grace Mendoza. She was sharp, calm, and didn't mince words. After reading the documents, she leaned back in her chair and said, "This will change everything, but you need to be ready. This kind of case gets ugly before it gets better." I was ready. I wasn't fighting for money or revenge. I was fighting for the truth, for my father's wishes, and for the home that carried the echoes of our life together. Grace began the legal process to have the will recognized officially. We filed the paperwork with the county probate court. Within a week, Cheryl received the notice. She didn't call me. Instead, her lawyer reached out to Grace with a sharp, dismissive message. "Our client believes this document is outdated and invalid." Grace was unfazed. "Let them fight it," she said. "The law is on your side." I still remember sitting in her office, the buzz of fluorescent lights above, trying to stay calm. My heart was racing, but underneath the nerves, something steady had taken root. Resolve. I started going through old photos and boxes from my apartment, searching for any more documents or letters Dad might have left behind. In one box, I found an old voicemail CD he'd made for me on my 21st birthday. It had his voice, lighthearted and warm, telling stories from when I was a baby. I listened to it 3 times that night, curled up on the couch with a blanket. That voice reminded me of who I was fighting for. Not the man Cheryl tried to erase, but the father who raised me with love and care. 2 weeks later, we had our first court hearing. Cheryl showed up in a black suit, dramatic as always, flanked by 2 attorneys. She barely looked at me. I wore a navy dress and kept my face neutral. Inside, I was shaking. The judge asked for opening statements. Grace delivered ours with quiet force, presenting the sealed will and my father's signed letter. Cheryl's lawyer called it suspiciously convenient, but the judge didn't seem convinced by their tone. He set a date for a formal review of the will's validity. Outside the courthouse, Cheryl finally spoke to me. She walked up, her eyes cold. "You think this will fix anything?" she hissed. "He loved me. He married me. That house was our home." I didn't flinch. It was his home first, and he made it mine. She sneered and walked away. I stood there, surrounded by strangers, feeling strangely calm. It wasn't about winning. It was about restoring something that never should have been taken. I wasn't alone. My dad had spoken, even from beyond. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The years of quiet tolerance, the day I found the house empty, the call from Mr. Halpern. It all felt like part of a larger reckoning. Cheryl had tried to claim the past, to rewrite it in her image. But now, piece by piece, I was reclaiming it. Not just the house, but the story, my story. And with each step, I felt closer to him, closer to home. The next hearing was only weeks away. Grace warned me that Cheryl's team would come armed with arguments and distractions. But we had the truth. And more than that, we had my father's words, written in his own hand. I held onto that letter like a lifeline. I read it every night before bed. In it, he had told me to be strong, that people might try to take what was mine, but I should never let them define me. And I wouldn't. I was ready to finish what he started. The weeks leading up to the second hearing were tense. Grace worked late nights, coordinating with appraisers, collecting statements from my father's close friends, even reviewing his financial history for inconsistencies. We were building a timeline, proof that his intentions were consistent long before Cheryl entered the picture. It felt like we were reconstructing his legacy, brick by brick. Some nights I sat in silence, just listening to old voicemail recordings or flipping through family albums. I missed him, but I also felt like he was guiding me somehow. Through all of this, Cheryl, meanwhile, had begun spinning her version of the truth. She told neighbors that I was greedy, that I'd shown up after his death just to fight for things that didn't belong to me. A few mutual friends reached out, confused. I didn't waste time defending myself. Grace advised me to stay quiet, let the facts speak in court. But it stung, knowing how easily someone could rewrite history when the person who lived it was gone. Cheryl's charm had always been performative, but now it was weaponized. When the second hearing came, the courtroom felt smaller than before. The air was still, heavy. The judge reviewed the sealed will again, this time with a forensic document analyst present, someone who confirmed its authenticity, noting that all signatures matched and the seal hadn't been tampered with. Cheryl's lawyer tried a new angle. They argued that the will had been superseded by intent, citing her marriage to my father and the years she lived in the house. But the judge wasn't moved. Intent doesn't overrule a properly executed legal document, he said calmly. Cheryl's face tightened at that. She shot me a look across the room, a mix of hatred and disbelief. For a moment, I saw something raw behind her eyes. Not love for my father, not grief, but panic. Maybe she had truly believed the house would always be hers, that by removing my father's belongings and closing the door on me, she could rewrite what that place meant. But paper has memory, and so did I. My dad had left more than a house behind. He had left clarity, protection, and love in ink. Grace stood up and introduced the next piece of evidence, a series of dated emails between me and my dad discussing the house, our plans to renovate the basement into my studio, even a message where he mentioned finalizing the will. Cheryl's attorney objected, but the judge allowed it. I looked over at Cheryl as Grace read my dad's words aloud. Her expression didn't change, but her hands tightened around the arms of her chair. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a collapse of the story she'd built for herself. After court, we stepped into the hallway where reporters had gathered. I hadn't expected media attention, but someone had leaked the case to the local news. Grace shielded me from questions, answering only what was necessary. One reporter asked, "Dana, what are you hoping to get out of this?" I paused, then said, "I'm not hoping to get anything. I'm trying to protect what was already mine." It wasn't rehearsed. It was the truth. That clip would later go viral, sparking debates online about stepfamilies and inheritance. Later that night, Cheryl's lawyer called Grace with a settlement offer. They wanted to avoid a full trial. The offer was steep. She would give up the house if I agreed not to pursue any of the personal items she removed, or take legal action for damages. Grace presented it to me calmly. I sat at her desk for a long time, staring at the folder. Part of me wanted to say yes, to end it all. But another part, the part that still remembered finding the house empty, knew I couldn't. "She doesn't get to erase him," I said. "Not like that." We declined the offer. Grace was proud of me, though she warned it would get harder now. Cheryl wouldn't go down quietly. She'd likely drag things out, appeal decisions, paint herself as the widow fighting against an ungrateful stepdaughter. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't afraid of her. With every document we submitted, with every memory I reclaimed, I felt stronger. It wasn't revenge I was chasing. It was restoration. And I was almost there. One more hearing would settle it. As I left the courthouse that week, I passed by the old park where Dad and I used to walk every Sunday after breakfast. The trees were green again, the air warm and sweet. I sat on a bench near the swing set, watching kids play, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not because the fight was over, but because I finally felt my father's presence not just in the house, but everywhere. He had taught me to stand my ground, and I was doing it. The final hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Everything rested on it. Cheryl would have one last chance to argue her case, and we would have ours. Grace prepared the closing statements. I prepared myself emotionally. I knew I might cry. I knew Cheryl might lie. But I also knew this was the moment my dad had prepared me for. The moment when truth would speak louder than anything she could take. I wasn't just reclaiming a house. I was reclaiming my father's legacy. And no court in the world could silence that. The morning of the final hearing, I woke before sunrise. The city was still quiet, wrapped in a gray mist. I sat by the window with a mug of coffee, rereading my father's letter one last time. His words had become a kind of armor. Outside, the streets slowly came to life, cars passing, voices rising, life continuing. But inside me, everything was still. I wasn't anxious anymore, just focused, determined. I knew this wasn't just about legal rights. It was about putting truth back in its rightful place. At the courthouse, Grace met me at the steps. She looked calm, confident. "This is the day," she said, handing me a copy of our final statement. Cheryl arrived minutes later in another sleek black outfit, flanked by her attorneys. Her expression was unreadable. I watched her from across the hall, wondering if she still believed she deserved everything. If she ever truly loved my father, or just the life he built, maybe both. But today, none of that would matter. Today, only the truth would stand. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed all documents again. Grace stood and delivered our closing argument. Her voice was even, measured, but full of quiet power. She spoke of legacy, of love, of intention. She reminded the court that my father had taken the legal steps to ensure his wishes were respected, even in his absence. That his sealed will wasn't a footnote. It was the plan. Cheryl's attorney countered, arguing once more about outdated documents and assumed marital rights. But their words felt hollow now. Then the judge spoke. His tone was firm, final. "This court finds the sealed will valid and legally binding. The property, as per Mr. Carson's written wishes, is to be transferred in full to his daughter, Dana Carson." For a moment I didn't move, didn't breathe. Cheryl gasped. One of her lawyers put a hand on her arm, whispering something. She looked straight ahead, frozen. I closed my eyes. Not in triumph, but in relief. My father's voice had been heard. His trust in me had not been in vain. Outside the courtroom, I didn't celebrate. I just stood under the open sky, breathing in the warm summer air. Grace joined me, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You did it," she said. I nodded, but I knew this wasn't about doing. It was about enduring. Cheryl walked past me without a word. Her face was stone. Maybe someday she'd understand what she tried to take wasn't hers to begin with, or maybe she never would. Either way, that chapter was closed now. A week later, I stepped back into the house for the first time since that awful day she shut me out. It was still empty. Bare walls, no furniture, echoes in every room. But this time, it felt different. It felt like a blank canvas, not a wound. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, imagining where everything used to be. The sun streamed in through the windows, painting golden shapes on the floors. It didn't hurt anymore. It felt like possibility. I brought in one box that day. Just one. Inside it were framed photos. A small vase my mother once loved, and my father's favorite record, Coltrane's Blue Train. I set it up in the living room, right where his chair used to sit. When the music played, it filled the house again, not just with sound, but with memory. I sat cross-legged on the floor, letting the melody wash over me. It was like he never left. Not really. His presence was woven into the very bones of this place. Over the next few months, I took my time restoring the house. I painted the walls, refinished the floors, planted new flowers in the backyard where Dad once gardened. I didn't rush it. Every change felt intentional, healing. I didn't want to erase what was. I wanted to honor it, to build on it. Friends came by to help, bringing laughter and wine and old stories. The house slowly filled with life again. Not just mine, but his, ours, as it was always meant to be. I never heard from Cheryl again. She moved out of state, according to Grace. I didn't follow her story. I didn't need to. What mattered was that she no longer held anything of mine. Not the house, not the story, not the past. I sometimes wondered if she missed him, or just missed the version of herself she had while standing next to him. Either way, she had lost something too. But the difference was, I didn't take it from her. She tried to take it from me, and failed. Now, when I walk through the front door, I don't just feel like I've returned home. I feel like I became it. This house isn't just where I live. It's where I reclaimed my voice, where I learned what legacy really means, and where my father still exists, in the photos, the creaks in the floor, the records on the shelf. He gave me more than a will. He gave me a foundation, and from it, I built a life no one can take.